Welcome to History Basics, How Historians Think. If you have ever stared at a source-based question and had no idea where to start, this video is exactly what you need. Before we study any topic in Sec 1 history, we need to understand how historians actually think, how they use evidence, and how they explain the past. By the end of this video, you will have 7 powerful thinking skills that apply to every topic in your history course. Let's begin. This video is for any Singapore Secondary 1 student who wants to understand how historians think, not just memorize facts. If you have ever lost marks on a source question and wondered why, this video will help you fix that. In the next 17 minutes, we will cover everything you need: evidence and sources, inference, accounts and interpretation, causation, change and continuity, significance, empathy, and diversity. These are the core tools of historical thinking, and you will use them in every history lesson and exam from here on. Here is our roadmap for today. We start with evidence and sources at the 2-minute 15 mark, move to inference at 6:15, accounts and interpretation at 8, causation at 9:30, change and continuity at 11:30, significance at 12:30, empathy and diversity at 13:30, and we close with practice and recap at 15. You can use these timestamps to jump to any section you need to review. Now, let's get into it. Let's begin with the most fundamental question: what is evidence? Evidence is information from sources that helps historians study and reconstruct the past. Think of historians like detectives. They cannot travel back in time, so they look for clues, and those clues are evidence. Evidence can take many forms. It can be written records like letters, diaries, and newspapers. It can be photographs and maps. It can be physical artifacts like objects, buildings, and tools. Or it can be oral accounts, interviews and speeches recorded by people who were there. The key point is this: without evidence, history is just guessing. Everything a historian claims must be supported by some form of evidence. Now, not all sources are the same. Historians divide sources into 2 types: primary and secondary. A primary source is created at the time of the event by someone who was directly involved or present. A diary written by a soldier during the Japanese occupation is a primary source. A photograph taken in 1942 is a primary source. An official government letter from 1890 is a primary source. A secondary source, on the other hand, is created after the event by someone who was not there. Your history textbook is a secondary source. A documentary made decades later is a secondary source. A historian's published article is a secondary source. Primary sources give you more direct evidence because they come from the time and place of the event. Secondary sources are valuable too. They often combine many primary sources and give you a broader picture. Both types have a role. Once you have a source, you do not just read it and accept everything it says. Historians ask 3 key questions to judge a source, and the first is about origin. Origin tells us who made the source and when it was made. Why does this matter? Because a source made by someone who was present at the event gives you more direct, first-hand information. A letter written by a Japanese soldier in 1942 is coming straight from the experience. But a book written by a historian in 1990 is coming from someone who was not there. They are interpreting and reconstructing based on other sources. That does not make the 1990 book wrong, but it means the kind of information it gives you is different. Always check origin before you decide how much weight to give a source. The second question historians ask is about purpose. Purpose tells us why the source was made. There are 3 main purposes. A source made to inform is sharing facts or information, like a census record or a government report. A source made to persuade is trying to change what people think or do, like a propaganda poster or a political speech. A source made to record is keeping a permanent account of something, like a court transcript or a logbook. Why does purpose matter? Because if a source was made to persuade, the person who created it might have exaggerated, left things out, or twisted the truth to support their argument. That makes it biased. A source made simply to record is more likely to be straightforward. So always ask yourself, why did this person make this, and does that affect what they chose to include or leave out? The third question is about reliability. Reliability means, how trustworthy is this source? A source is more reliable if it was made close to the event, if the author had direct experience of what they are describing, and if other sources say the same thing. On the other hand, a source is less reliable if the author had a reason to lie or exaggerate, like someone trying to protect their reputation, if it was made long after the event from memory, or if no other source supports what it says. The most important technique here is cross-referencing. That means checking what one source says against another source. If two different sources, made independently, agree on the same point, that information is more likely to be reliable. If only one source says something, you need to be more careful. Time to pause and think. I want you to look at two sources about the fall of Singapore in 1942. Source A is a diary entry written by a British soldier on the 15th of February 1942, the actual day of the surrender. Source B is a history textbook written in 2005. Pause the video now. Ask yourself, which one is the primary source and which is the secondary source? And which one might give you more direct information about what actually happened and why? Take your time, think it through, then unpause when you are ready for the answer. Here are the answers. Source A is the primary source. It was written during the event by someone who was actually there on the day Singapore fell. Source B is the secondary source. It was written 63 years after the event by someone who was not present. So Source A gives you more direct information because the soldier experienced the surrender firsthand and recorded his thoughts immediately. His account is raw and immediate. But here is something important to consider. Source B might actually give you wider context. The historian who wrote the textbook in 2005 had access to many different sources, documents, other diaries, official records, and could piece together a much fuller picture of what happened and why. Both sources have value. They just offer different kinds of information. Now let's look at one of the most important skills you will use in your history exams, inference. Inference means reading clues from evidence and drawing a conclusion. It is not just describing what you see, it is explaining what the evidence suggests beneath the surface. Let me show you the difference. If you see a photograph of long queues at a food distribution center in Singapore in 1942, you could describe it and say, "This shows people standing in a queue outside a building." That is description. But inference goes further. It asks, what does this suggest? And the answer is, this suggests that food was scarce during the Japanese occupation because people had to queue to receive rations they could not get on their own. See the difference? Description tells you what is there. Inference tells you what it means. Here is a sentence frame that will help you write a strong inference every single time. Say, source X suggests that blank, because the source states or shows blank, which implies blank. Let me fill it in with our example. Source A suggests that food was scarce during the Japanese occupation, because the source shows long queues at a food distribution center, which implies that people did not have enough food at home and had to rely on ration supplies. That is a complete inference. It has the conclusion. Food was scarce. It has the evidence, the long queues, and it has the implication. People could not feed themselves without outside help. Memorize this structure. Use it in every source-based question. Now let's talk about accounts. An account is a version of an event told by a particular person or group. Here is something that surprises many students. Two accounts of the exact same event can describe it completely differently. And this does not mean one of them is lying. It happens because the two writers had different experiences of the event. different purposes for writing about it, and different perspectives shaped by who they are and where they stood. A Japanese commander who wrote about the fall of Singapore in 1942 might describe it as a great military victory. A British prisoner who was captured that same day might describe it as devastating and humiliating. Both are describing the same event. Both are telling the truth as they experienced it. But the accounts look very different. Historians compare accounts to understand why they differ and what each one reveals. Connected to accounts is the idea of interpretation. Interpretation is a historian's explanation of what an event means. History is not just a collection of facts. Two historians can study the same event, look at the same evidence, and still reach different conclusions about what it means and why it happened. And here is the important point. Both interpretations can be valid, as long as they are supported by evidence. This is very different from saying anything goes. The evidence still matters. But it means that history is not simply a fixed set of right and wrong answers. It is a discipline built on argument, evidence, and explanation. In your exam, this is exactly what you are being asked to do. Not just recall facts, but make an argument and support it with evidence. Let's move on to causation, one of the most common thinking skills tested in your history exams. Causation is about explaining why events happened. A cause is the reason something happened. An effect is what happened as a result. These often form chains. Take Singapore's founding as an example. Singapore had a natural harbor and a strategic location on major sea routes. That is a cause. Because of that, Stamford Raffles recognized its potential and chose it as the site for a British trading post in 1809. That is the effect. And then that effect becomes a new cause. Because Singapore became a free port open to all traders, merchants and workers arrived in large numbers. The population grew rapidly and trade expanded. One thing led to another in a chain. In history, events almost never have just one cause or one effect. Your job is to identify the causes, trace the effects, and explain how they connect. Causes can also be divided into two types, short-term and long-term. A short-term cause is the immediate trigger, the specific action or event that directly sets something off. A long-term cause is the background reason that built up gradually over time and made the event possible in the first place. Let me use the fall of Singapore as an example. The short-term cause was that Japanese troops crossed the Johor Strait in February 1942 and launched a direct attack on Singapore. That was the trigger. But the long-term cause was British overconfidence. The belief that Singapore was an impregnable fortress that could not be attacked. The long-term cause tells you why the event was possible. The short-term cause tells you what actually set it off. Historians also look at change and continuity. Change means what became different over time. Continuity means what stayed the same. This is an important balance to understand because students sometimes assume that history is only about big dramatic changes, that everything before a major event was one way and everything after was completely different. But that is rarely true. In Singapore between 1819 and the early 1900s, many things changed. The population grew rapidly as migrants arrived. New buildings, roads, and port facilities were built. British laws and administration were introduced. But many things stayed the same at the change and continuity happened together. And a good historian notes both. Here is a concrete way to see this. Before 1819, Singapore was a small fishing village with very few permanent settlers and limited trade. After 1819, it became a growing trading port with rapid population growth and a free port policy that attracted merchants from across the region. That is the change. But look at what stayed the same. Singapore's location on the major sea routes did not change. That was the very reason Raffles chose it. The mix of different communities in Singapore did not disappear. It grew. And the island's reliance on trade as its core economic activity continued. It just scaled up massively. When you answer a change and continuity question in your exam, make sure you address both sides. What changed and what stayed the same? That shows a complete understanding of the period. Now let's talk about significance. Significance means why an event is worth remembering or studying. Not everything that happened in history is equally important. Historians judge significance by asking, did this event have a big impact on people or on Singapore? Did it affect a large number of people or just a few? Did its effects continue long after the event itself? Did it cause major change in society, government, or people's lives? The founding of Singapore in 1819 is a good example of a highly significant event. It transformed the island from a small fishing settlement into one of the most important trading ports in Asia. It attracted tens of thousands of migrants. Its effects shaped Singapore's development for the next 200 years and beyond. That combination of scale, impact, and long-term effects makes it historically significant. Here is a practical guide for judging significance in your exam answers. Ask yourself 4 questions. First, who was affected? Just a few individuals or a large number of people? Second, how much did things change, in a small way or fundamentally? Third, how long did the effects last? Did they fade quickly or continue for decades? Fourth, is this event still relevant to how things work today? The more people affected, and the longer the impact lasted, the more significant the event. And here's your key exam tip. Never just write that an event was important or significant without explaining it. Say why it mattered. Say who it affected. Say how long the effects lasted. That explanation is what earns you the marks, not the label. Historians also use empathy to understand the past. Empathy does not mean feeling sorry for people or agreeing with what they did. It means understanding how people in the past thought, felt, and made decisions based on the situation they were actually in, not the situation we are in today looking back. People living through the Japanese occupation of Singapore in the 1940s felt fear, confusion, and deep uncertainty. They did not know how long the occupation would last. They did not know whether their families were safe. They had to make difficult decisions about how to survive under harsh conditions. Understanding that context helps you understand why people made the choices they did, and it stops you from judging them unfairly by what we know now. In your exam, empathy comes up when you are asked how people may have felt or reacted to an event. The final thinking skill we cover today is diversity. Singapore's history is not a single story told from a single point of view. It is many stories, lived by many different groups. Chinese migrants, Malay communities, Indian workers, European administrators, and many others. Each of these groups had different roles, different living conditions, and different experiences of the same historical events. A European merchant in the 1800s experienced Singapore very differently from a Chinese coolie laborer working on the docks. A Malay fisherman's experience of the founding of Singapore was different from a British government official's. When you study history and when you write your answers, remember to include the full range of people who lived through it. History is richer, more complete, and more honest when we look at all perspectives, not just the powerful or the famous. All right, time to test yourself on everything we have covered. Pause the video right now. I have given you 7 skills on the left and 7 meanings on the right, but they are all mixed up. Your job is to match each skill to its correct meaning. You have evidence, inference, causation, change, significance, empathy, and accounts. Match them to information historians use to study the past, reading clues to draw a conclusion, why something happened, what became different over time, why an event mattered, understanding feelings and choices in context, and different versions of the same event. Pause now, go through all 7, and then unpause to check your answers. Here are the correct answers. Evidence matches to information historians use to study the past. Inference matches to reading clues to draw a conclusion. Causation matches to why something happened. Change matches to what became different over time. Significance matches to why an event mattered. Empathy matches to understanding feelings and choices in context, and accounts matches to different versions of the same event. If you got all 7 correct, your historian's toolkit is ready to use. If you missed any, go back and re-watch that section. It is worth getting right before you move on to the content topics. Let's close with a final recap of everything we covered today. Evidence is the information historians use to study the past. Without it, history is guessing. Inference means reading clues from evidence and drawing a conclusion about what it suggests. Accounts are different versions of the same event, shaped by different experiences and perspectives. Causation is about explaining why events happened, including both short-term triggers and long-term background causes. Change and continuity looks at what became different and what stayed the same over time. Significance asks why an event matters and who it affected. Empathy helps us understand people. These 7 skills are your tools for every single topic you will study in Sec 1 history. Use them in every answer you write. Before you go, here is what to do next. Complete your guided notes. Fill in the blank sheet linked in the description below. Then try the practice quiz with 10 questions to test what you have learned. And finish with your exit ticket. Just 2 or 3 sentences to lock in your thinking. All of these resources are free and linked below the video. If this video helped you understand how historians think, please like it so more Sec 1 students can find it. Subscribe for weekly Sec 1 history videos. And leave a comment below telling me which thinking skill you find hardest. Is it inference, causation, or something else? I will see you in video 2, where we look at early Singapore and the rise of Temasek. See you there. No voiceover. YouTube end screen with soft background music at 10 to 15% volume. End screen displays links to video 2, early Singapore, and video 3, how Singapore became a British trading post, with a subscribe button.